Matt, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. UAPs, otherwise known as UFOs, are a concern of our military as well as Congress. Just the other day, the War Zone broke the story. Mysterious drones swarmed Langley Air Force Base for weeks. The unidentified drones were such an issue that assets were called in from around the government, including a NASA WB-57 high-altitude jet. Wow. So anyway, so these mysterious drones, they swarmed Langley, and of course the Air Force is not saying a whole lot about it. Now, the government deployed their intelligence gathering aircraft to try and determine what they were looking at, where they came from. And yeah, man, it's just crazy. I think we'll hear more about that. Now, tackling the UAP issue is, of course, no small feat. And today we have folks from the UAP Caucus joining us. Plus, have you ever wondered what the Wikipedia editing group, the Guerrilla Skeptics, think of you and the UFO community? Well, we have a treat for you after our interview with the UAP Caucus, which, by the way, we pre-taped early yesterday. Part of what we're trying to do is keep the show time, or when we air, consistent. And we are going to either stay at noon on Pacific Sunday, or we may slide it to 1. But we try to keep it in the same sort of time slot because we often have our friends from the UK and Europe on our show. So if we put the show too late, we can't, we can't take advantage of that. Of course, we always like to do live interviews so you folks have a chance to answer questions. Now, I will answer questions after the show, so stick around for that. But anyway, the UAP Caucus, they were only available to do the interview early yesterday morning, so we're going to roll that. It's a really great interview. I think all of you are going to be really impressed with what they've been up to. But all right, the ask. But first, hit the subscribe and thumbs up button on YouTube. You can also find us on Twitter at Good Trouble Show and all other social media platforms at The Good Trouble Show. We always appreciate a comment, share, like, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe. You can also find us on your favorite podcasting platforms. Just search for The Good Trouble Show. We're a little bit behind in posting our podcast episodes, which are essentially the audio version of this, but we're slowly catching up. You can also become a financial supporter of The Good Trouble Show by going to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. And for the price of a coffee, you can support our work. Finally, on YouTube, Super Chats are open and are a great way to show your financial appreciation for our work. I also want to thank our existing financial supporters on Patreon and YouTube. You can actually become a financial supporter on YouTube by I don't know. It's somewhere on the interface. I'm not good at this kind of stuff. And also I want to thank our chat moderators who volunteer their time to keep the chats nice and clean and kick off the riffraff, that kind of thing. I very much appreciate everything they do for the show. These guys, they take time away from their families on the weekends to help us out. And I really do appreciate it. We are also going to do our best. As I've mentioned a bunch of times, I am literally a one-man operation. I have no staff. Like I mentioned, I'm very lucky to have volunteers that help us on the chat room, but you're looking at the whole thing right here. So it's always a challenge balancing work life and all of that kind of stuff. But I am attempting to do 2 shows a week. We're going to go for Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific. That seemed to be the consensus. We ran a poll on our Patreon channel and our Patreon page, as well as on YouTube. So we're going to try and do that every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific, just to kind of break it up and give you guys a little bit more. And we may sort of be expanding our show to include a wider range of guests that I think you will find very interesting. And at the end of the day, we're here to keep you guys entertained, and we are very much grateful for the generosity of your time spending it here with us. All right, enough of that. So yesterday morning, we had the pleasure, as I mentioned, of interviewing 2 folks from the UAP Caucus group. And here we go. I hope you guys enjoy it. Our next two guests are making a difference in moving the ball forward on the UAP issue, not only for the public, but in the halls of Congress. Please welcome from UAP Caucus, the creator and founder, Lester Nare, and the head of legislative relations, Ronak Patel. Guys, how are you?
Hello, good sir.
Doing good.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, firstly, welcome on the show. This is the first time to have you guys on, and yeah, man, I'm glad glad you guys are here. There clearly has been a lot of news in the UAP topic as of late, and we'll get into that. So. Let's see. So Ronak, before discussing your organization, why is the UAP issue important for just the average American?
Sure thing. And delighted to be here, Matt. I think there are a few reasons as to why the UAP issue is important for the average American. One being the misappropriation of funds of our taxpayer dollars that are funding these UAP programs, whether they're the UAP programs in the public light, such as Arrow, or these illicit UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs that individuals like David Grush have tried to shed the light on. Ultimately, our taxpayer dollars fund these programs, and we're being lied to and not being given a straightforward answer to these phenomenon, which I think is deeply concerning. Another reason why I think this issue is important for the average American, it comes down to aviation safety. As a student paramotor pilot myself, I deeply care about this issue of aviation safety, and ultimately we need to know what's flying around in our skies for the safety of pilots and passengers, but it also stems into national security concerns as well. And another reason I think that this issue is important for the average American ultimately comes down to scientific understanding and advancement. By truly tackling the UAP issue from an interdisciplinary approach, I think that we can really find out a great deal about new technologies and an ultimate new understanding of science, leading us to a paradigm shift.
So, Ronak, do you think the American public is even ready for this kind of news?
Honestly, I think that a majority of people in the public are ready, and this really comes from my personal conversations with people in my own life. Recently, I had the opportunity to teach a group of high school students about the history of the UAP subject, and a lot of them were interested in this topic and wanted to know more about this. And also the public discourse, I feel like people in the public are ready for this. When you see a lot of these news developments, such as the recent historical records report from Arrow, a lot of people are just fed up with a lot of the obfuscation and the not straightforward answers. And this has been going on for quite some time throughout the decades. We can reference news articles and even pop culture going back decades. And I think that it's a long time coming. And to answer your question, yes, I think the public is ready for this.
Yeah, I kind of think in a way they really don't have a choice at this point. This stuff is definitely happening. Now, Lester, as founder of UAP Caucus, do you think the government is ready to tackle this?
I think that might be the more challenging issue that we're seeing right now. It is sort of, obviously they have a lot of different issues that they have to deal with on a daily basis. We are in a very destabilized situation globally right now on a variety of fronts, whether you're talking about the economy, the Israel-Hamas situation, China, Taiwan, Ukraine, Russia. So there are a lot of competing initiatives, issues that members of Congress and the larger government as a whole need to be dealing with right now. And that's all on top of the fact that it's an election year. Obviously, that's not going to be a permanent state, but part of why we are doing the work we're doing is to help bridge that gap where there's not necessarily the time for many staffers or members to sink their teeth into this issue, which is, I think, much more expansive and in depth than a lot of people give it credit for. And there is an increase in the, I think, preparedness level or the amount of people that understand the level of the issue and what needs to be done. But I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done on the government side than the public side.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. Now, UAP Caucus, is this the same as the Congressional UAP Caucus?
So what's interesting is, when the original Congressional UAP Caucus was sort of founded by Representative Tim Burchett late summer last year, we saw there to be an opportunity because most congressional UAP caucuses, which are made up of members of either the House, the Senate, or both, if it's bicameral, all host their stuff on a .gov link. So, the Progressive Caucus has their own .gov link, but we saw an opportunity for the public to have sort of a public, quote unquote, UAP caucus as different from a congressional UAP caucus, but ultimately saving the same purpose, which is to help increase the awareness of the issue and kind of bring a level of seriousness and analysis and thought leadership. Again, that at the time was not really existing around what is the government's involvement with this issue in the modern day. We had several pieces of legislation coming out in the IAAs and the NDAAs for several years at this point, but there wasn't really many platforms that were hosting both the content and analysis with contextualizing it into the longer 70-year history of this subject.
Now, do you guys coordinate with these members of Congress in both the Senate and the House, Ronak?
Yeah, we've been trying to coordinate with members of the Senate, and as Matt Laszlo has said, the Senate and the House are two different universes. We've been getting a lot of engagement with the House side. So we've been coordinating with some of the members of the direct congressional UAP caucus and providing some of our briefing packets to their staffers.
Got it. Okay. And so Lester, what exactly, if you were to sort of summarize what your organization UAP Caucus is, what is it and what are its goals and kind of how is it set up exactly? Is it a lobbying outfit? Just kind of explain a little bit more what UAP Caucus is.
It's interesting because you could almost think of it almost like a skunk works project, right? So in our view, there's a lot of work that needs to be done right now in a variety of areas. And, one of the tools we have is the fact that we have the internet, we have software, we have these systems that allow us to be able to spread a message far and wide. So ultimately, the initial and primary goal of UAP Caucus, which we launched September 4th of 2023, was to drive greater awareness amongst members of Congress and having a primary goal of increasing the membership of the Congressional UAP Caucus. At that point, it was in the lead up to negotiations over the UAP Disclosure Act. And the obvious point there was if there are more members of Congress that are aware of this, once it, in theory, eventually passed, we would have a groundswell of people that were going to be able to be sort of read in on the issue and understand how best to move forward as we moved into nominations. Obviously, the UAPDA did not pass, but over the course of that process, right, there was no strategic vision from the former government cohort that we're all familiar with about what we could do as the public to sort of drive forward this issue. The text for the bill kind of just dropped and no one really said anything. Senator Schumer and Rounds never really made any public statements. There were a couple posts here and there, but again, there was no one really creating a North Star of saying, where are we trying to go? What are the steps we can take to get there? And what are the materials that we need to help onboard people who are not already either on UFO Twitter, on the UFO Reddit boards, or really well aware of this issue? So that's really the core place that it started. But how it sort of evolved is into this sort of combination of a disclosure and discovery paradigm, which I think was most popularized by Ryan Graves, this idea that there are actually two lanes here that are important. There's both the pushing on the Congress and the legislative side to do the deeper investigations and push this issue forward in terms of following up on the allegations from whistleblowers. But at the same time, whether you like it or not, I think some of the comments from Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick about the need for greater material or academic sort of context around this issue helps create fertile ground for you to have further sort of government involvement. So as a practical example, as you have any kind of government process declassify documents or create a more of a reality around this issue for scientists to grab hold onto, you might then see an increase in funding and studies towards this issue. And similarly, if studies around this issue are discovering that there's something mysterious here, it gives more credence and credibility for members of Congress to then dig in and say, wait a minute, we don't necessarily believe what the DoD is telling us. So there's this sort of viral loop between those two sides of the equation. And we're trying to sort of, as a, again, kind of skunkworks project, put out concepts, ideas, thought leadership, materials, tools, software, and platforms that can sort of help in either of those two lanes.
Got it. And there are other organizations that are tackling the UAP issue. Who are some of them similar to yours or not similar that are playing an important part in all of this? For you, Lester.
So there are quite a few, and obviously this has been a process for a long time. So obviously, if you go back as far as the 90s, you had Stephen Greer's The Disclosure Project. In the modern era, there's probably, I'll say, sort of two categories. You have the likes of Danny Sheehan and Stephen Bassett with the New Paradigm Institute, who are working on the ground. They have an office in DC, and they're coordinating really face-to-face around some of the, as he mentioned on your show the other day, what are the legal implications for this stuff? What crimes may or may not have been committed? How do we get the DOJ involved? And how do we get Congress to work and push forward on, getting to a place where we have something similar to a church committee? You also have sort of a new batch of, let's say, these digital first sort of platforms that include, what we're doing at UAP Caucus. You also have Declassify UAP, which is run by Nick Gold. He has sort of a different set of tools, but again, is focused on some specific declassification targets. Again, we know there's stuff out there. We know there's a lot of this information that exists. It's just not made for public consumption. So that's easy, low-hanging fruit for us to push for. And you also have sort of similar organizations like Disclosure Diaries, which is run by Mo, which has a great timeline of this whole process in real minute detail. Again, providing more what we sort of call on-ramps or doorways for people who are not already kind of engaged with this issue to find something to connect about. And we've seen this sort of spiral, even sort of in the last 6 months. Those three sort of, 3 to 4 organizations, New Paradigm Institute, Disclosure Diaries, UAP Caucus, and Declassify UAP, all really ramped up, between the summer and fall of 2023. Obviously, Danny Sheehan's been doing this work for quite some time, but in terms of their new web presence and push, where we've now seen them everywhere. And it's been really fantastic to see, because I think we all take a different lane or a different sort of role in the process, which is, I think, partly why we've seen just a continued increase in the number of people that have not already been into the issue or associated with the issue, beginning to become curious, right, and do their own research. So that's been really fantastic to see, just across the board, the rise of advocacy groups, of normal sort of political or social movement advocacy groups that you'll see in all these other arenas. There's mechanics and concepts that we're now starting to implement specifically for the UAP topic at scale.
Got it. Now, Ronak, I want to get into your website a little bit later. What you guys have put up is really pretty amazing. But let's talk about Congress. So, following the Arrow historical report, do you think any of the lawmakers bought into this whole narrative from Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, this what I call a conspiracy that he's sort of thrown out there, that members of Congress and their staffers have been completely hoodwinked by a bunch of UFO enthusiasts? Do you think, Ronak, that Congress is buying any of that?
I'll say with the official congressional UAP caucus, there's not a chance, especially after coming out of their recent briefing with the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community. Representative Moskowitz, for example, he had said, based on what we heard, many of Gresh's claims have merit. And through our discussions, Lester and I, with some of the staffers of the congressional UAP caucus, we know that they're not letting up on this issue, especially in light of the recent historical records report. So I think there's not a chance. I will say, with some lawmakers, there is a bit of a caveat to this question, in that they may buy into this if they don't look at the UAP issue too much, or they're not briefed in on it. We can reference, some of Matt Laszlo's work with Ask a Poll, in that when he asks some lawmakers, sometimes they're not aware of David Grush or the UAP issue. They say, oh, UFOs, I haven't really looked into that. So there is that caveat as well. But I will say there's not a chance with the official UAP caucus.
I would certainly hope so. It was weird. It's like Kirkpatrick has been coordinating with Stephen Greenstreet on these just bananas conspiracy theories. It just blows my mind. Now Lester, so the implications of the whole UAP issue are obviously very profound, and in your bio, it states that that UAP Caucus was founded with the mission to bridge the gap between scientific inquiry, public interest, and legislative action. How exactly is UAP Caucus bridging those gaps?
I think it kind of goes back to that sort of disclosure discovery paradigm that we were just talking about. So part of the challenge is that the understanding of what the bleeding edges of the information that we know is not evenly distributed. So what I mean is there's a small group of people that are aware of everything that's been going on and where exactly we are in the process. And that group of people fundamentally needs to get larger if on the legislative side, this process is going to move forward. At the end of the day, it's still an incentive-based system, and there's just not a level of groundswell that's high enough to really have the sort of push from the public demand aspect for something to happen. As a sort of practical example to compare, the TikTok ban bill that just came out, that was rushed through, has obviously received a large amount of public pushback. And as such, the lawmakers are kind of now second guessing a little bit and shifting around. So,
Right.
Part of the challenge is we need to just bring more people into the fold. And there are a variety of ways to do that. A lot of the work that you do, a lot of the sort of media folks, journalists, et cetera, in this space, you guys are at the bleeding edge, getting us the newest information, helping make sure that we're keeping DOD, et cetera, accountable. But the sort of issue is we have the caboose of the train, which are the people who might not even know about the UAPDA, the people who might not even know about David Grush or any of these other aspects. So there is sort of a process by which we need to bring people forward. And at the same time, a lot of those people are like, okay, well, where's the data or where's the evidence? So these issues are sort of interconnected in the sense that we need to create better sort of a more robust library of information for people to grab onto. Some people are going to come in from the experiencer angle. Some people are going to come in from the government angle. Some people are going to come in because they just want to look at the science. So creating resources around those three core areas. And then one of the things that we've done post UAPDA is I have this concept where there's a first generation of UAP software applications that can exist that can have huge impact. As an example, if you're a radar expert, if you're someone who's a data scientist, an AI, ML engineer, and you just want to get access to some data sets to kind of just do some analysis and see what's going on, and is there something to this issue? There's no central repository for UAP data sets, radar data sets that someone can access, quickly duplicate, deploy their own AI pipelines to. So we're working on a combination of both sort of thought leadership and creation of briefing packets and white papers to help, again, define the problem. Because if we don't do that, the problem will be defined by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. So that's part of the challenge.
We don't want that.
And we don't want that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is also helping to build out more of these tools that can help us actually sort of facilitate the transfer of information, the understanding, the latest data. As a practical example, we're actually this coming week going to release a sort of a revised version of Carl Nell's UAP hypothesis slide that leaked out from a tweet from the New Paradigm Institute that was not included in the Soul videos directly, but was a very fascinating breakdown of all of the possible theories of origin. And so we're going to release it as a UAP origin classification system. And why does something like that matter? When you have Arrow, putting out a historical review report where they're trying to make the claim that the only possible solution is the extraterrestrial hypothesis, not clearly defining it, not differentiating whether NHI and ETH are the same thing, when there's a whole slew of other possibilities, whether you're talking about metaphysical or psychological, again, pulling from that slide from that presentation. By having a central resource where all those things are ID'd, and then people can start having a shared language about what do we mean when we say ultra terrestrial, interdimensional, all these things. So these are some of the ideas of, again, legislative public awareness and sort of the science. There is an intersection of these things. And this is, again, kind of why we're a little bit of a skunk works, because we're kind of doing a little bit of everything and trying to create some conversation and inspire people, right? And one of the last note I'll make here is what's been so interesting is the number of folks who are now building their own things, starting their own podcast platforms, or even their own local events from inspiration from either work we've put out or just seeing that we're also just normal, everyday people. We're not former government folks. We're not,
Right.
academics. The Soul Foundation is important, but they're also still somewhat in an ivory tower because they're still focused on academics, the scientific community, sort of those internal backroom conversations. I mean, it was a whole process to even get the videos out from the inaugural conference. What about the public? Where is the public involved in these conversations? So serving sort of the public's voice, being a part of serving up the public's voice in this context, we think is super important.
I completely agree. So Ronak, speaking of like Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the Arrow historical report, and the stripping of the Schumer amendment, do you get a sense from members in Congress that they are losing any, that, let me put it this way. Do you sense that members outside of the UAP UAP caucus in Congress, outside of that group specifically, do you think the other members of Congress are now losing interest following Kirkpatrick's report and what happened with the Schumer amendment?
Well, honestly, I think I don't have a solid answer to that. I think that those members outside of the UAP caucus may be losing interest if they have read the historical records report. I can see how that would shift their perspectives on this issue. But when it comes to the UAP caucus, there's not a chance that they're losing interest. We know that they're trying to work on a field hearing or field hearings. They're working on more legislation. And even with the cohort that's been intimately involved in this issue in the Senate side, such as, Senators Schumer, Rounds, Rubio, I think they're certainly not losing any interest, especially with whistleblowers and other UAP witnesses going directly to their offices. And also, I feel like they're not losing any interest, especially when Senators Schumer and Rounds had about a 7-minute colloquy on the floor just last December. I think that was a very key moment. And Lester, if you want to touch on that, please do.
I still love that moment. I think that moment was just such an interesting and, again, historical kind of moment on the floor of the Senate, because you have two senior senators, one of whom is the Senate Majority Leader, unequivocally sort of stating the reality of the issue. And again, if you listen to the substance of how they framed it and the reference to the JFK kind of Records Act and how they reformed it, this is not something that is speculative. I mean, Matt, I know you've worked in and around politics for a long time. They're not a proactive group. It is very rare that they're going to do something without it already being in existence and having to deal with the ramifications of it. So the way that was framed, I thought was so interesting. But even at that, I think with Arrow's report coming out, we're still seeing people, thanks to, again, Matt Laszlo doing a lot of great groundwork in the halls of Congress. You're seeing Senator Cornyn saying, oh, what was passed from the, sort of shell version of the UAP Day was monumental. You're having Representative Norman bringing in Lou Elizondo for a briefing at a conservative breakfast in DC. My view is that the topic has become distributed enough amongst the members of Congress that even outside the direct congressional UAP caucus, you see folks like Representative Garcia, Representative Krishnamurthy. Unfortunately, he's retiring, but Representative Gallagher has been, big on this issue. there's sufficient interest from a disparate group of people, both Democrats and Republicans, both centrists and extremists in either of those parties. And that spectrum of that makeup of people who view it as serious, I think, is unmatched by any other issue that is currently popular in the zeitgeist. And I think that's meaningful. I mean, again, think of one other issue where you have Matt Gaetz, Luna, Burleson, and also Garcia, AOC,
Right.
Moskowitz, all generally at a high level, viewing that from different aspects, viewing that this is worth their time. I can't think of one, but maybe somebody else can. I think that's meaningful. And I don't think that means that this is not going away.
Yeah, I would completely agree. Now, Lester, who are some of the other members that are part of UAP Caucus?
So at the moment, it's just myself and Ronak. We are sort of the two founding members here at the organization. But I will say we've gotten some great support from a lot of known players in the community and members in the community. For the time being, we want to kind of keep it tight only because as you get larger, it becomes a management issue. And it's just, we're not currently monetized. We do all of this as a volunteer operation. So we are going to look to begin to expand the team a little bit as we get later into the year, but it's made up of the two of us, which I think, again, one of the things that speaks to is the amount of work you can do with a small group of people is actually massive. And I hope it encourages anyone who's on the fence or thinking, if not me, then who, get in the arena. There's so much work to be done, and you can do a lot with a small group of people. I mean, there is no shortage of, I think, passion from the community about this, but a lot of times people ask the question, well, what can I do? Right. And hopefully we're continuing to inspire different folks with ideas of what they can do, not only doing the direct outreach to their members, but also sort of more involved or more robust efforts that you can do both in your own communities or with other folks that are sort of a part of the online UFO Twitter community as well.
Got it. Now, Ronak, the UAP caucus, the congressional UAP caucus, do you think that they understand that what we're really talking about here is not something from China or Russia?
Yes, when it comes to the congressional UAP caucus, I believe that they are leaning more towards the notion that what a majority of these UAP are, right? The UAP that are demonstrating 5 observables are more than likely to not be adversarial technology or a secret U.S. government program. I believe that that's what they're doggedly trying to verify right now behind the scenes. And yeah.
Yeah, I certainly think so. We want to focus. I mean, certainly the non-prosaic stuff is important, or the prosaic stuff is important for national security. We don't want stuff floating around. But I think the real elephant in the room is the non-prosaic stuff. So speaking of which, I heard you guys speaking earlier before we went on air about what just came out in the war zone regarding this very long drone incursion over Langley. What do you guys think about that? And what are you hearing about it? To me, this doesn't sound like drones at all. This sounds like UAP.
I mean, this is in a post 9/11 America. It is incredible to me that this is not front page headline news. We have a multi-day incursion where they can't really give a description of the drones. They say, oh, they're a variety of sizes and shapes and numbers. Very weird.
Very weird.
And again, this, regardless, even if you say regardless of origin, right? That's a problem. And it's a problem, especially when we're talking about, again, coming back to the current moment. We're in a heated sort of situation with Ukraine, Russia. There's a lot of nuclear saber rattling happening from the likes of Putin. Obviously, there's a concern about China. Obviously, so like again, not necessarily for people who believe that this has NHI origins, but even if you're a regular DC Beltway person, this should be something that is raising major alarm bells
Exactly.
to at least focus on the issue. And then when you look at it and you realize, okay, they're sending in NASA space plane to okay, what drones do you need to be sending our most highly advanced reconnaissance platforms to be like, this is I was blown away when I read that, because I'm like, within a week of the historical review records report coming out, you have this issue, and the contrast and the juxtaposition between what's really happening and then what's being said, which again is not consistent out of the DoD, because the DoD IG report brought up the point that we are unprepared for exactly what just happened, whereas Arrow is trying to tell us there's nothing to see here. So instead of worrying about whistleblowers and making up whatever you think conspiracies are, maybe you should focus on your own organization actually having a singular viewpoint on the subject before you go outside to try to cast aspersions on everybody else. Because currently the DoD does not have a unified position on this issue.
Which just it absolutely blows me away. And I'll touch on this during the show earlier. We've pre-recorded this, obviously. But one of the things that I'm definitely going to bring up is exactly what you spoke about in terms of there was no kinetic action taken against these things. So when you're putting up secret, signals intelligence and electronic intercept platform to go and suck up information out of these things, this tells me that they do not know what this is. If
Correct. This
were China or Russia, number one, I would think, and I'm not a military guy, I'm just a talk show host, that if China or Russia were to deploy a bunch of drones to sit days over Langley Air Force Base, how would that not be considered essentially an act of war? How is that not, as you mentioned, front page news? So when you step back and look at it, the fact that there seemed to have been an emphasis on intelligence collection of this and no effort that we know of to knock these things out of the sky. And I would also point out as well, an adversarial country, in my opinion, would not put tons of their drones over a U.S. military base, knowing full well that there's a super high chance that some of them are going to get knocked out of the sky and retrieved by our military and reverse engineered, studied, all that kind of stuff. So to me, it makes absolutely no sense that these are drones from some kind of adversary that we're not aware of.
I want to make another note here. You're
Sure.
100% right, and the possibility for escalation, again, given the current relationship we have with these alleged players, adversaries who could be doing, the potential for escalation is massive. And I don't think they're going to make that calculus. For what reason, right? No. What is the logical thought process that would make this make justifiable sense? It is just beyond comprehension, that, again, people aren't even just asking these basic questions. Look what happened when we knew it was a Chinese spy balloon. They said it was Chinese immediately, right? They didn't hesitate. So if it was China or Russia, they would have gotten their lackeys at the different spots to say that so it could reinforce whatever narrative. The fact that they're not saying that is extremely curious, at the least.
I think it's curious, but I also think that, quite frankly, it's disturbing. Ronak, any thoughts on this as well?
It ultimately boils down to national security concerns. Ryan Graves has kind of touched upon this in one of his recent articles, and whether or not these are prosaic explanations, drones from the U.S. or adversaries or advanced UAP, we need to know what's flying around our airspaces, whether these are civilian or military airspaces. We need to know what's going on.
Yeah, 100%. And they need to tell the public. They need to level with the public. As I've said on this program from day one and elsewhere, you can't keep the toothpaste in the tube. This is coming out. And the Pentagon and the CIA, if they think that they are going to keep this secret hidden, as they've done so, in my view, illegally for literally decades, it is not going to work. And they are digging their hole deeper and deeper the longer they put this off. The Band-Aid is going to get ripped off. The Pentagon and the CIA are just making it worse for themselves the longer they delay on this. Now, Lester, you guys have an amazing website, and I'd like to show some of our audience what you have on there. So I'm putting it up. So this is your newsroom, Get Inside the UAP Caucus. So tell us a bit about what we can find on this page moving forward.
Yes. So there's a couple of different resources here. So again, like we mentioned before, different people have different entry points. So we start with the newsroom, which is sort of the first place you can go into to be able to kind of see recent events, recent news articles that are super relevant and sort of help people get grounded in the fact that this is something that's happening. If you tab over to the next tab, there are also people who might not really be grounded in the history of the subject. So we created this guides view to kind of be able to provide some entry points for people to understand, the different aspects of how to think about this issue. So even in what we're just talking about with, if you click through to behavior patterns at the top left, right, we have this Langley Air Force Base incident. So like, how do we even define different aspects of behavior in order to know what's weird or not weird? So they were formation flying and they were having location specific behavior, but it was non-aggressive. And what were the energy? So this is sort of trying to help people, again, get an understanding of the ways to think about when you talk about UAP, what makes it weird? What are the variables or the aspects that you would look at to sort of understand what is outside the norm? And so we have a variety of different guides that not only touch on stuff like behavior, but theories, the historical context. So it's, again, a huge amount of resources for people to kind of just sink their teeth into. Each one of those rows has the ability for you to kind of sort of dig into a deeper level of understanding. Next to our guides, we have our speed dial tool, which has been super huge. So we basically are doing rapid response here. So right now, it's been updated to our language around the select subcommittee, given Representative Burleson's request to Speaker Johnson for the creation of a UAP select subcommittee, which I will mention, we put out a white paper in October of 2023 to call for the creation of a UAP select committee, not select subcommittee. We do know that Representative Burleson's office has read that white paper before, so it would not be surprising that was at least a part of their calculus, was that kind of as an entry point. They obviously tried for the subcommittee, the select committee. They didn't think it could work, and subcommittee would be better. But the point here is it's a call, email, and auto email tool that we are constantly changing and updating with members who are most relevant in real time based on what's going on. So when the UAP BDA was going on, we had the whole House Armed Services Committee, the House Intel Committee on here with all these call tools, and we did these big call campaign days. So again, that's just sort of a place where whatever's happening, we try to make sure we have the right messaging for outreach to those members. And then the next two tabs over are super straightforward. Organizations has a very brief list. This is not meant to be expansive, so people don't hate on us if you're not here. We're trying to keep this to things that like sort of have, again, the audience for UAP Caucus, there's a couple. One of them is sort of the Beltway crowd, which includes staffers, legal, members of Congress, and other federal employees. So we're trying to keep it in that context. And then the last tab over is our research papers library. So again, discovery and disclosure. So there's a lot of fascinating research that's happening right now. And, a lot of times, even, within my own family, both my father and father-in-law are science oriented. When they first kind of heard me talking about this, they were like, there's no science behind it. And I was like, hey, have you checked out this page yet? And they both were really blown away by the amount of sort of, new papers that were were robust and that were providing real scientific rigor. So again, we're sort of having a variety of these different resources, but one of the most interesting things is at the top menu, if you click the vote menu option in the black
Right
header menu.
Okay.
So this is one of the things that was pretty unique about our platform when we started, which was we created basically our roadmap and voting board, because this is not meant to be, Ronak and I dictating from our ivory tower what should or shouldn't be done. A lot of the stuff that we do is coming from community submissions. So we have two sort of views here. We did a 2024 predictions timeline where we just gathered all of the most popular predictions of the sort of the end of the year, because there's also this accountability issue of there's a lot of people who say stuff and then it doesn't come to fruition. So it's like, okay, how do we sort of start tracking this stuff a little bit better, as well as then adding a roadmap of what's actually been accomplished. So all the legislation that's been passed with links to that legislation, all the legislation that might be under consideration at any given time, it's all on that roadmap view, such that we can, again, try to really look at, we sometimes forget how far we've come in 5 years. So it's just, again, for someone who's new, they can kind of jump in and be like, oh, wow, there's like actually a lot going on here. And again, always linking back to the primary source for that material. So we're trying to provide a variety of different touch points, entry points, because some people might be interested in the research papers, some people might read the news articles, some people might want to track the progress. But the point is, it sort of encompasses the entirety of what's happening in Congress around this issue, and at least on the research papers side, what are some of the new, what's the new bleeding edge research that's happening around this topic. The only last thing that we have on there, which you can see on the homepage, is our papers that we sort of produce and create in-house. We've done, I think, 4 or 5. We started out with the original white paper for a UAP select committee. We then did briefing packets for the original DoD IG briefing in 2023, as well as a UAPDA overview. So if you just scroll down on this page towards the bottom, you'll pass the guide section, and then we'll have sort of our blog roll of our internal content. And obviously, one of the things you can see is we tried to make the design and the user experience really high quality. One paper that I'm really super interested in is the sovereign wealth fund paper we put out in February is really important, because one of the things that people keep talking about is, oh, eminent domain, what are we doing with the materials, intellectual property, where does the money go? And one of our thoughts is the way that our system is set up financially, with intellectual property, with legal, the issue of UAP materials is not going to fit into any of our existing boxes of adjudication around this. And I include eminent domain in that. I mean, how are you going to find what the just value is for what is potentially a multi-trillion, tens of trillions of dollars of derivative value? So the point here is we're trying to put out these ideas of how do we start solving these problems that, if you listen to Hal Puthoff's Q&A at the Seoul conference, he talked about how they did this whole session around, we identified all these areas about why we couldn't disclose. And one of them was the materials issue. Well, okay, has anyone talked about a sovereign wealth fund model where you could have shared IP rights? You could have then shared revenue streams based on the research. You could have then security protocols across the board. And we've seen sovereign wealth funds work in other areas and other arenas. It seems to be the closest existing framework that can be used as a starting point to have a conversation about how do you actually deal with UAP materials. But that's not a conversation we're getting on MSNBC. That's not a conversation we're getting on CNN. It's not a conversation we're getting on News Nation. But it is fundamentally going to be one of the core questions if and when we get this issue out into the public domain, which is, what do we do with the stuff?
Right. Yeah. It certainly is a huge part of it. Now, Ronak, how can the general public help move the ball forward on the UAP issue?
I think one of the most important things that the general public can do to push this topic forward is to reach out to their representative and senators in Congress, because ultimately these people represent us, and this issue it's had a lot of trouble historically when it comes to transparency, and we as the public have a role to play in the disclosure movement. And I believe that by contacting members of Congress, we can help ultimately advance this issue forward. Start out by messaging, your own personal House rep and senators, and then you can expand upon that. For example, we have the latest call campaign on the UAP Caucus website on the speed dial page where we're advocating for the select subcommittee. That'd be a great start. I'd recommend checking out declassifyuap.org. Nick Gold created that website, and he's got this little tool on there where you just simply input your name. It's already got a pre-built message for you, and you can feel free to edit that to your liking. And you simply send that, and you should get a response back from your representatives. But like I said, if you combine that with calling your representatives, emailing them, I think that'll boost your chances more. And I'd also recommend people to check if their elected officials are holding any sort of town halls. I think that's a great way to directly engage with your representatives. For example, last year, I'm not a constituent of Mr. Burchett, but I did have the opportunity to speak with him directly. He had held a town hall that was over the phone, and I had a chance to ask him about the latest developments on the UAP hearing, and that was prior to David Grush coming out. And we got some insights from that, and that he was in negotiations with the Speaker of the House at that time, and mainly wanted to focus on having aviators come in to testify. So you never know what sort of responses you may get. And, regardless of the UAP issue, it's a great way to engage with your members in Congress, as ultimately in this democracy, it's our right to engage with the elected officials in Congress that represent us.
Absolutely. So Lester, how can folks support UAP Caucus?
I think the number one thing they can do to support UAP Caucus is do all the things that Ronak just said. Really, our number one goal is to increase the membership of members in Congress in the Congressional UAP Caucus. And ultimately, we want to make it bicameral. So honestly, the number one thing they can do is, check out the resources, check out the tools that we've built out, and do the communication, whether you feel most comfortable doing it with the people you know, or you feel most comfortable doing it in online communities. The number one thing is we need to create as many on-ramps as possible. We need to bring as many people into the tent as possible. So to the extent that you feel comfortable doing so, whatever your angle might be, if you're coming from the experiencer angle, totally fine. If you're coming strictly from the government declassification angle, totally fine. If you're a technical expert and you want to increase the quote unquote professionalism around the scientific rigor and technical analysis, the number one thing is I want everybody to get into the arena. That's the best way to support the work that we're doing, because ultimately we're trying to get to the end goal. So for us, it's really, let's all get our hands dirty. Let's get in the arena and let's do the work. And the UAPcaucus.com website, along with other platforms such as New Paradigm Institute, as well as Declassify UAP and Disclosure Diaries, are all great resources that have different angles for you to sort of get, as some of our friends say, as just to get into the game, right? When you pray, you have to make sure you move your feet. So let's move our feet.
I love that. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck. I can't wait to see what developments you guys bring to the table. I'm super, super excited that you guys are doing this. Your website and how well this is all laid out is just incredibly impressive, and your efforts trying to get Congress to do its job we can't keep this thing keep the toothpaste in the tube any longer. And I certainly applaud your efforts. So thank you so much for joining us. All right, there you go. So let's see here. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And actually here in a few minutes, Jim Quirk from the Quirk Zone will be joining us for the very first time. Actually, this came to me in the middle of the show. I'm going to show a little bit later a tweet from him, and I decided, you know what? I wonder if this guy would like to come on the show. I've seen him a couple of times. I love his style. And it's going to be interesting. It'll be like going on a first date. So hopefully, technically, it'll all be fine. We weren't able to pre-test anything. And it's going to be great. Now, I'm going to talk about the Guerrilla Skeptics, and got a bunch of media to show. Usually when I'm doing a bunch of stuff with different media, I try and pre-tape it because it's hard to switch and all that. So it may be a little bit clunky, but Hopefully not. So in January, researcher Rob Heatherly was on our show to discuss this large group of Wikipedia editors called the Guerrilla Skeptics. This group of around 150 editors is headed by a nonprofit called the About Time Project, based here in California, and founded by Susan Gerbic. I'm going to play a little clip here.
So I run a Wikipedia editing group, and it's an international group of approximately 150 people. We're located on Facebook in a secret group called The Secret Cabal, because these are private groups or secret groups. You can't join them. I have to allow you, and I have admins that will allow you to join the group. But we check you out because we don't want to allow, somebody in who's, infiltration. Oh my gosh, yeah. So that's where we spend a lot of our time. But we've worked on pages on UFOs and spontaneous human combustion and all kinds of different topics that are pseudoscience or misinformation. Wikipedia is the single most important tool in the skeptical toolbox that we have. But we keep track of all the Wikipedia pages that we have made a massive a rewrite to or have written. And we are now at 1,230 pages, and we keep track of how many page views those 1,230 pages have, and we're at 51 million page views, over 51 million page views. Homeopathy, we've changed that page drastically. The lead, the very, very first couple sentences of the page, which most people is the only thing they read, we've used the word quackery. I mean, that's so awesome.
I am so proud of these people and the other 100. I have 113 people, and I'm always looking to recruit and require more.
How in the world do people still support this woman? We even have on here her conviction, her legal conviction. Here, if you click on...
For a gold investment scheme.
Yeah, we have it so you can actually go and see where she's a convicted felon. So when people say she's a convicted felon, we're like, go to Wikipedia. There it is.
In the last week, those 500 pages have created, in the last week, 215,742 page views. In the last month, 1,563,493 page views. And in the whole time that these page views have existed, these pages we've written, the GSOW project has written those 500 pages, and those page views are now at 19,063,934 page views. So if you want to be part of the solution...
Yeah, and those are old numbers. We'll give you the new numbers here in a bit, but yeah, it's insane. So this group targets any Wikipedia page they consider pseudoscience, all the way from chiropractic to homeopathy, like she just said, or like we pointed out earlier, to UFOs, of course. They create or rewrite these pages to push their debunker point of view. And because they've been doing this since 2010, they wield considerable seniority as editors on Wikipedia. So they can just bump off or ban junior editors who are coming in and trying to make edits, which is one of their tactics or bullying tactics. So how influential are they? So she spoke about, I think it was 2 years ago, that last clip. But as of March 13th this year, they have completed over 1,997 Wikipedia pages with a total of 109,605,260 views. That's insane. I'd love to get those amount of views on this show. Anyway, so some of the Wikipedia pages they've edited are like ATIP, David Grush, Lou Elizondo, which Susan created from scratch, by the way, Dr. Hal Puthoff, and journalists such as Ross Coulthart and George Knapp. And they also do this. They also create and maintain Mick West's and fellow debunkers pages. They understand that, let's say, like I'm CNN, and I want to book Mick West on CNN. That segment producer, say that the segment producer is unfamiliar with Mick, the first thing that segment producer is going to do is go to Wikipedia and find out what they can about Mick West. So the Guerrilla Skeptics, they make sure that their fellow debunkers, their pages are absolutely immaculate because they want people from the media, when they go and look at the background of these people, to see the shining, glowing Wikipedia page about one of their own. It's insane. And then, of course, the bias, if you compare Mick West's page and compare it to David Grush's page, it's literally night and day. Now, since we first broke this story with Rob Heatherly's appearance, along with an additional appearance with him and parapsychologist Craig Weiler, who's been battling these guys for a very long time on our show, and others, and of course topping it off with Rob's appearance on Coast to Coast Radio with George Knapp, people are taking notice of this propaganda operation, especially on UFO Twitter. The UFO community is rightfully pissed, and they should be, and is making that apparent on Twitter to Susan herself on the Twitter platform. Now, here's one of her tweets. Let's bring this up here. Quote, how long before the UFO and the Bigfoot people join forces against the GSOW team? Can QAnon be farther behind? FYI, they haven't found the GSOW Twitter account until I just now am using it. Great researchers not. Actually, I think our researchers are quite good, especially the team that Rob Heatherly is running. The main complaint is that these folks deciding what goes on Wikipedia know literally nothing about the topic of UFOs, paranormal, etc. And in this response on Twitter, I'll bring this up next. On this response on Twitter, Susan responds to the invitation from the podcaster Jim Quirk, who we are going to have on here in a minute. Jim Quirk says, tell you what, Susan, why don't you come on my podcast and we'll both talk about Roswell? Susan replies to Jim, Roswell, I don't know anything about Roswell. If we could talk about the harm psychic mediums do to grieving women, then I would be tempted. And I just want to underline she said women there, and I'll get to that in a minute. Or this grief vampire medium, it's just insane. Anyway, so, these folks are not scientists. They are not even researchers. They are a propaganda operation. And let's see here, my prompter, of course, stopped working. They are literally a propaganda operation. And as I said, we always have interesting stuff going on here. They're a propaganda operation that, their whole thing is literally to own this whole narrative. They understand that that the whole Wikipedia thing is, if they can own Wikipedia, they of course are going to own the entire, or they are going to own the entire narrative. And anyway, yeah, so let's look at some of their other tweets as I try to get my teleprompter working again. Let's see here. So next one, Susan Gerbic, sorry, it's Gerbic. I don't think I've seen anything more full of crap than this Craig Weiler guy today. And but where are the women? Then we're going to go to the next one here. She's got this whole victim thing going on. G-Man is going to give me credit. Thank you for your generosity talking about Craig Weiler there. So, and now one of the things that she also stated on Twitter was that that somebody emailed her with a threatening email, and this came from her, of course, on Twitter. This is just one sample riled up by you all. Craig Weiler, Brandon Fugel, pound violence against women. I've never received this kind of hate until you started the post. These people are unwell, and you are releasing them on me. Yeah. Here's another post. FYI, men, I'm getting a lot of scary hate from people who are repeating your points. One of these people may try to harm me. If so, you're ultimately morally and financially responsible. The world is only going to see a gang of men attacking women. Now, interestingly enough, Rob Heatherly, of course, being the researcher he is, he went and actually looked up this email, and he found that the email address is invalid. So she posts this apparently threatening email, and Rob posts here on Twitter, email address is invalid. I've reached out to the person named, whose company is named in the null email address. So take whatever you want. Whatever you want from that. It's just yeah. I don't know what to say about that. So let's see here. So one of the things I found out was that every other, maybe like a couple times a month, she has this trivia thing where she has her Guerrilla Skeptics on her YouTube channel. These are public videos. Now, on these videos, I took the last 3 of them, and they're like 3 hours long, and it's essentially like a big Zoom meeting with all of her Guerrilla Skeptics, and they're playing this whole trivia thing. They're talking about different things, but of course they're also talking about us. So I pulled out some of the relevant clips related to what they think about the UFO community and UFO Twitter. And now I edited these things. Some of them are not in order so that they contextually make sense when I'm playing this back. But what I would suggest, if you're interested, is just go to Susan Gerbich's YouTube page. Again, these are all public videos. This is not doxing anybody. These have been up for quite a long time, and if you want to just get a feel for what goes on in her group, I highly suggest watching. So anyway, here, we'll roll this and take what you want from it.
Forces with UFO people now. So now
I listened to that UFO podcast by the Rob guy, and there was a part in there where they were all go, oh yeah, these skeptics, they don't believe in afterlife, they don't believe in astral projection, they don't believe in homeopathy. What's wrong with them? It was like the whole kit and caboodle. It was a UFO podcast, and they were going every crackpot thing there is, they were mentioning.
Yeah, crackpots. I guess they look at us as just a bunch of crackpots. So they're enough said right there. So yeah, and the guy that was talking, that looks like he's hanging out in his bed, kind of creepy. That guy, his name is Rob Palmer. He's known as the well-known skeptic, and he is. I don't know what the organizational structure is of the Guerrilla Skeptics, but he has been, I would say, probably the number 2 guy in that entire group. And as a matter of fact, when Guerrilla Skeptics was brought up in front of an arbitration board for Wikipedia, one of the remedies, from how I understand it, Rob Heatherly would better be able to explain this, but from what I understand, this guy, Rob Palmer, was banned from editing people's pages on Wikipedia, but I think he's still doing it. So anyway, here's a little bit more of their whatever you want to call it, group fun.
Listening to that thing with the on the coast to coast, and they're making those statements that they think that it's just impossible that these people on Wikipedia have so much time on their hands that they can do all this editing. And I'm like, what are you guys doing?
I tell you what we're doing. We're trying to undo all of this shit that you guys have done since 2010. I mean, it's insane. And the thing is, like, if you look at the work that Rob Heatherly is doing and Craig Weiler and all of these folks, this has been going on for such a long time. There is so much stuff to unravel. So, you know what? My hat is off to Rob and these folks that are really doing the hard work to bring this stuff forward. So let me, I think this is the next clip.
Listening to that thing with the
Nope, no, sorry, wrong one.
Panel after panel after panel, and they're all sitting there with their microphones and their videos, and
they're all guys. You guys are a bunch of little boys, little winkers.
What I've noticed is the UFO and the Bigfoot world is mostly men, and the people who believe in psychics is mostly women.
I wonder if it's this is just me speaking, it's all male. And they're all, most of these people who are interested in UFOs are ex-military, ex-police, or geared that way. Like, they're
they love that world of Top Gun and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's very different than being in that world.
Well, that's true, but it's got that macho kind of like I don't know if I would say macho necessarily, but that kind of testosterone driven kind of feel to it. The trolls of UFO Twitter are running for office with their MAGA friends and their Hollow Earth and people who believe in psychic phenomena, all those people together are all an alt med.
Yeah, they're all men. They're all MAGA. They're all ex-cops. They're into Top Gun. I'm a Democrat, so I'm definitely not MAGA, and I'm definitely not law enforcement. Although I have to say I did enjoy Top Gun, especially the remake. So let's see some more.
Recently, there has been a lot of Susan Gerbic controversy regarding the UFO community. One of the shameful things she has apparently done, notice it's in quotes, so shameful in quotes, is to put the incorrect birthplace of Lou Elizondo, I have no idea if I said that right.
That's right.
Okay, on his Wikipedia page. However, there is not a reliable source with the apparent correct birthplace. So an editor finally just changed the birthplace to the USA. Name either the state that Elizondo was reported to have been born in or the state he says he was born in. So either one. And it's the state.
Not the province.
Province and
not a condition like he was born in a state of,
Oh, that's good, Deborah. That's good.
Yeah, wow. I don't know what to tell you about this group. Anyway, joining us for the first time, hopefully all this technically works. My prompter took a dump earlier, so we'll see. But joining us for the first time is the host of the Quirk Zone. Please welcome Jim Quirk. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on, Matt. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. We're already off to a smashing start here. I've got the wrong box up here. So there we go. That's a little bit better.
All right.
So what do you think about all this baloney? It's pretty crazy.
Unfortunately, these people are victims of stigma. I mean, they grew up believing certain things in a certain way, and unfortunately for them, now they're stuck there and they can't break out of it. These people have obviously never even studied this. They never considered it. And they are controlling these Wikipedia pages as you've been talking about here, as Rob has pointed out. And the other thing is there's so many inconsistencies and lies here. They make it sound like they group everyone in the UFO community into like, okay, they're all MAGA, they're all men. That's what about Linda Moulton Howe, who for decades was studying the cattle mutilation phenomena? What about all of that stuff? You don't hear anything that she for some reason, Susan Gerbic has this issue with men. Obviously, that's one issue here. I guess we can talk about. That's one issue. That's nonsense to say that there's only men involved in studying this. I mean, there's a lot of different women, like I just said, Linda Moulton Howe, Jenny Randalls. I mean, there's a lot of women who are interested in the subject that have studied this, have put books out, have made documentaries, and so I don't know where she's coming with that, because obviously you could tell just by what she's saying here, she's completely oblivious to what's been going on in this world over decades. All the research long before 2017 came around, long before we ever heard of Lou Elizondo or any of those people, right, that we talk about a lot today. This has been something that's been studied by a lot of people for a long time, and it's not getting its due in Wikipedia pages because she has this stable of editors, like you talked about, they're controlling it, and they're not allowing to tell an objective story. They're just trying to give you one side of a debunking story where you're not getting the full story. They're not allowing people to make up their minds with this, the way they have it set up, and that's a problem. Now, Susan Gerbic, she sounds like she could be a nice person, someone who, she believes in herself. I give her a lot of credit. She did this. Look what she's done over the years. She established this group, and it's working but it's not working the way it should be. I mean, you have to be objective, and she's not being objective here, obviously. And I could talk about some examples. I actually did a couple of podcasts recently. I talked about, I went in there, after listening to Rob, and I was on one of the Wikipedia pages. I was actually doing some research on Edward Ruppelt, He wrote a book. He was a former Air Force captain, and he wrote a book in 1956. It was published in 1956 called the Report on Unidentified Flying Objects. And he mentioned in this book the estimate of the situation, which he personally saw, which was something that was put together in 1948 by Project Sign. He actually said he handled that. And then, but the way the Wikipedia page was set up for that book, it stated that there's no other proof, only his words, right? And that's not true. And I did some research. Actually, it was people like Richard Dolan talked about it in his book, that there was somebody else, Dewey Fournette, who he was someone else from the Air Force who actually signed an affidavit saying that he saw this estimate of the situation as well. So I went in and I made the change. And a few days later, one of these guerrilla skeptics came in, Lucky Louie, and removed all the changes I made. And he put it back to the way it was. And his reasoning was to remove the fringe element. And my argument was, this is not fringe. This is fringe. This is fact. Facts aren't fringe. I mean, this is a fact. There was somebody else that said he saw the estimate of the situation and signed an affidavit to that effect. But the guerrilla skeptics, they don't want to have that in Wikipedia. They need to have they need to hit the reset button and start telling both sides of the story. And if they can't find editors that can, then they need to get rid of them and bring in some new people. They need to try to be more fair and balanced. They need to provide an objective view on this, because for one thing, UFOs are a thing. There are people who experience these things. There are people who have extraterrestrial encounters, and they're just trying to brush it under a rug and say this is all part of QAnon and everything. I mean, lumping it in with all this other stuff, which is nonsense. Right? And that's what's going on here. We can't have this. So I'm upset about it, because I don't know. These people might be nice people, Matt, but I don't think that they are. I mean, by not even listening to us, No,
I agree. And so Rob Heatherly, he had reached out to me like months ago about this, and I really I didn't have the time at that particular point to dig into his research. And when I came back from the holidays, and he hit me up again, and he's like, man, you should really look into it. When I started digging into this, frankly, I was completely blown away. Now, as you mentioned, the organization that she's put together is absolutely, you have to give her a lot of credit. That is for sure. And to keep this going since 2010. But I think the thing that blew me away was how prolific, how big of an impact this actually has. And in that clip package that I put together, I believe one of the things that she said is they understand, and if it's not in that clip package, I saw it in one of the other things, maybe it didn't make it into the edit, but they understand. She says in her workshops, the workshops that she does, where she literally goes all over the place in California and elsewhere preaching the gospel on this, that they understand that the debunkers' number one tool in their toolbox is Wikipedia. And, Wikipedia, last I looked up, it was like the 7th or 4th most trafficked site in the world. So if you're Joe Blow and you have no idea what this whole UFO thing is, or you want to know something about chiropractic, you go to Wikipedia to learn about it. And so when it comes to the UFO topic, when you go and you read David Grush's page, you're like, what the, this guy sounds like a loon. It is so incredibly biased. So the average person that doesn't track this topic walks away from it after looking at it for the first time, and they're like, man, these UFO guys, they sound like a bunch of crackpots that they're probably into QAnon.
Well, even when you look at just what happened here just recently with that Arrow report, they come out with that report, and they actually have just a few people from the trusted news sources, as far as the Pentagon is concerned, come. They're the only ones invited, because then they know all the headlines are pretty much the same. No proof of extraterrestrials. So anybody out there who has a casual interest in this says, so it looks like the government shows there's nothing to it. Like, for the casual person out there, right? But then meanwhile, we're sitting here like, what are you talking about? So it's just so frustrating. I mean, especially there's people out there to just not they're unaware of the historical background to all of this, all of the tens of thousands of people that have encounters with not just UFOs but the beings themselves. It's so and all of it makes, like, throughout Wikipedia, it makes all these reports is all bogus. You always have a lot of comments from debunkers like Philip Klass to Brian Dunning, right? All these different, they get all the ink on there, right? Where you don't really see, a lot of times you don't even see like the names of Stanton Friedman or people that did serious research on this. You don't usually see their names, or if they do have their names in there, they'll say what they said first, and then but Philip Klass said it was all a joke, and then it will end like that. That's how it's set up. And it's just not right. And the whole thing is, I mean, it's going to fall apart. And we're moving to that position now where there's just so much information out there that this whole to me, this whole cover up, everything is about to collapse in on itself. They're not going to be able to maintain this for much longer. I think when people start, like, for instance, I think still Roswell is a big deal. And if you were to study and look at here's what the Air Force is saying: dummies and balloons. But over here you have like 100 different people. Here's 25 people who are in the military. This guy stood guard over the bodies one night. Here's another guy that flew the plane from Roswell to Wright-Patterson. Here's what he said. You have all these witnesses. So you're going to tell me that all these people were lying and the Air Force is telling the truth? It becomes untenable. Their story's untenable at this point. And we're catching up to Roswell. We're going to start catching up to that. People are going to start realizing that there's something more to that than what the Air Force has contended.
Well, and what I thought was interesting is you invite her on your show, which was a completely fair, gentlemanly invitation. And her reply is, well, I don't know anything about Roswell, but let's talk about something else. Was there any follow-up past that tweet that I showed on air?
I actually asked her. I did. I said, well, it doesn't matter that you don't know anything about Roswell. I'll present some information to you, some assertions that I'll make, and I want you to tell me why I'm completely wrong. Something to that effect. I gave her that opportunity. I said, I'll present some, and I want you to tell me now why I shouldn't believe my own assertions here. Like, I was going to give her that opportunity to debunk me. You know, that's what I want. I think some of these people are not even aware. Susan's probably not aware of a lot of the facts related to the UFO / extraterrestrial / whatever it is, non-human intelligence. I don't know what it is. I know that something's going on based on my own experience. So that's why that's the ultimate, the absolute proof that I have. So beyond, and then the research on top of it, it clearly shows you that there's something going on and that there is a cover up. There's just too much out there at this point to deny it anymore. And they are denying it.
Yeah, they're locked on. It's like they're completely locked onto it. I also want to just mention as well the email that she put up that was threatening violence. Now, again, what Rob put out there in his research indicated that this email was fake. If it is fake, if she did make this up, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think she's just trying to look for sympathy and and if it's a fake, that she's trying to make it look like, look at these nuts in the UFO community. I actually just did a podcast in the last couple of weeks where I talked about this, where, the UFO community, that's not their goal, is to cause violence and chaos and destruction. No, anybody in the UFO community really wants is disclosure. Now, if somebody contacted Susan Gerbic and made a threat, she should be calling the cops immediately. I mean, everybody who puts their face out there, right, are going to get some nasty messages. I get them sometimes. I haven't received one to this point where I felt it necessary to call the police, but you could bet your bottom dollar that if I do get a message like that, I'm calling the authorities, and that's what you need to do. You need to find out who this person is. I mean, you can't have that. That's nobody in the UFO community wants violence.
No one does, and I mean, I don't care what it is. There is no room for violence, period, whatsoever. Politics, whatever, just absolutely not. But I have to say that in my very short time in this UFO community, I have not once ever seen a DM or a tweet or anything that would indicate some level of unhinged violence. And I would frankly be surprised. But if she has received that, she absolutely should contact law enforcement. And going back to what you were just talking about, like with the Roswell thing, I think the thing that bugs a lot of us, and is that they have no background in this. So if she is, well, not if, she created Lou Elizondo's page from scratch to own the narrative, to be able to drive what that narrative is, and she doesn't even know anything about Roswell. I don't understand it. It like, I'm not going to write about something that I don't have at least some kind of idea about. It would be like, me deciding to do a UFO show out of the blue and not know anything about UFOs. It doesn't compute.
Well, I think what's happened here, she created this organization very successfully. I got to hand it to her. And basically what happened here, her expertise is not on UFOs or extraterrestrials, but she's brought some people in who are focused on that, or most certainly debunkers, and they know how to put words out there and put them together and make something look like it's phony or ridiculous. And that's what she's done. There's some of the people that she's working for she's brought in as an editor are obviously schooled enough to go in there and make these changes, and they know how to basically one-side something. They know how not to put in some of the other side of something. They're not being objective, and Wikipedia, it should be objective. You need to be able to put out both sides of something, particularly an important subject like this. To state that there's nothing to this when you actually have people in Congress right now trying to pass legislation, for instance, the gutted UAP Disclosure Act, people from both sides of the aisle wanted to have that, but yet for some reason this whole subject is still goofy to these people. They're not getting the hint here. They're just not, they can't do it. They're incapable of doing it. Their minds are just made up. They were made up a long time ago.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To me, it's like this sort of, almost like this arrogance that they think they know everything in the universe. They know that all this UFO stuff is bunk. Jim, much like, I don't know your story, but I've certainly experienced the phenomenon. I have no idea where it's from. I have no idea why it's shown up multiple times above my home and all the weird paranormal stuff. I literally have no clue, but I know it's real, and I know it's not seagulls or balloons or whatever Mick West's current theory is. But it is this kind of sort of closed-mindedness on their part. And you know what? And if you want to be closed-minded on something, knock yourself out. But when you take your view on the world and you want to impose it on everybody, or essentially hijack what is supposed to be a very unbiased platform, which is Wikipedia, and we're finding out it's not biased, or that it is biased. It's not unbiased at all. That's where I have a problem with it. When you go and you read, like I mentioned earlier, when you compare Mick West's page, which is immaculate, it is immaculately
He's
written.
like a saint.
Yeah,
he's going to be canonized. I mean,
yeah, totally. And then you go and you look at David Grush's page, or I mean, his is the main one that comes to mind. It's there. The bias is so clear. You would have to be blind not to see it.
Yeah. Well, they dragged Grush through the mud. I mean, they went out and they got that, when Grush went public, they actually, Ken Klippenstein himself admitted that he was sicked onto Grush by people within the Pentagon. He just came right out and said it, right there. We all know now. I mean, what the problem is here is like, they like to call the UFO community a cult, and it is not a cult. I'm skeptical. There's a lot of stories, a lot of stuff in this community that I don't believe, and I think there's a lot of arguments going on between people. But in the debunker community, it's usually not that way. They'll agree most of the time. You'll hear them. The most they'll agree on is that the fact that there has to be life out on their worlds. They'll believe that. That's because Carl Sagan allowed them to say that, because Carl Sagan did that. They are actually in a cult, as far as I'm concerned, and Carl Sagan has been he's ascended now to be that cult figure who they pray to. That's what's happening here. They are a cult. They can't break out of this shell that they're in. They can't do it. They're just incapable of doing it, because whatever Carl Sagan said, okay, it's okay to say. Well, just the other day, Michael Shermer was on Twitter and he quoting Sagan again. Always quoting Sagan. That's who they're cult figure is. That's who they pray to. And these people like Shermer, Mick West, they're like high priests in this cult. And why are they, and if it's so crazy, and here's another thing, if all of this stuff is so insane, I ask you, why are they not like, how come they're even concerned? Why are they even talking to us? Like, why are they even worried about this? Like, I wouldn't go talking to a flat earther or trying to tell them facts. What's the point, right? I mean, so if this is so crazy, why are you worried about it? I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, the analogy that I've used, it would be like Jim, if you told me that you think Chewbacca is real, and you're tweeting that Chewbacca is real, he's not a fictional character, you saw him running around in your neighborhood, I'd be like, Jim, knock yourself out. You want to go tweeting about Chewbacca, go for it. But I'm going to go have lunch with my wife, and that'd probably be the last time you ever heard me say anything about your Chewbacca belief. The amount of time that they spend on this stuff is, to me, it's suspicious, because it's almost like, well, not almost, I mean, it's like this Lucky Louie guy who Rob is very confident is Mick West. If you go, apparently, and you look at Mick West's posts on Metabunk, and you look at the posts by Lucky Louie, the syntax, the language, all of that is like literally identical. When you go and you look at Lucky Louie's, when he's in the talk page on Wikipedia, it's using phraseology that you would only, or vocabulary you would only hear from people from the UK. So it's highly suspicious. But even if Mick West is not Lucky Louie, when you go and you look at and this is what blew me away, when you go and you look at the volume of edits that this Lucky Louie guy out of the Guerrilla Skeptics has been doing, it's like this dude is literally on his computer 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. debunking all day long. Kind of like Mick West.
Well, that's a mystery.
It is a mystery. But I think where I'm going with this is that I would be wildly surprised if this is a hobby to a few of them. I've always felt that there is such, and you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, there is such cohesion. They are all in lockstep in terms of messaging between the journalists and what seems to be now Sean Kirkpatrick and his DOD minders. It's like they are all on the same page, versus the UFO people. We have differing views. I'm much of the same mind. I think it's good to be skeptical. There are certain things, as you mentioned as well, that I'm kind of not on board with. I try and have an open mind about it, but the debunkers and the amount of time that they are spending on Wikipedia, when I look at the amount that Lucky Louie has been doing, if I were Lucky Louie and doing this 5-6 days a week, 40 hours a week, whatever, I sure as hell would want to get paid for it. I wouldn't want to do it for free.
I mean, when I was talking before about this, just some of those little changes I made to that book that was written by Edward Ruppelt on there, I mean, that took me time. That took me time to sit there and put find the right quote, find the right what do you call it? The source, the right source to put in there. It takes time. That would have to be a job. It looks like it's a job for somebody. Is it someone from the Pentagon, maybe? Or is it someone who's just a retiree who's completely brainwashed and a cult follower of the debunker crowd and is a big fan of Mick West? And I mean, it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is that there's lies going in there and half-assed, half information, or just half truths, not the full story. That's the problem that's what's going on, regardless of who it is. Whether Lucky Louie is Mick West denies that. Okay, maybe it's just somebody who really is a big fan of him. Okay, maybe it's someone from the Pentagon. Maybe there's a few of them from the Pentagon. Hey, this is a way we can control it. We'll take control of these Wikipedia pages. We'll work with the Guerrilla Skeptics. What are we to think otherwise? I don't know. That we could speculate, but whatever it is, it stinks. It stinks. That's the bottom line.
It definitely stinks. And one of the things that I think stinks about this is if you think about it, they are deciding for all of us what media outlet, what journalist is considered acceptable as a source on these Wikipedia pages. So there's this kind of code or whatever. They have this sort of language for Wikipedia, but it is this code is WP, all caps, WP:fringe. And what they do is they label journalists and outlets, so like journalists like Ross Coulthart, or I don't think they have Chris Sharp on there yet. I'm sure he'll be on that list, knowing how these guys operate. Ross Coulthart, or they've labeled as WP Fringe the he ran the David Grush story. I'm having a senior moment. The debrief.
Yeah.
So because they are making these decisions as far as who is an acceptable source on these pages, they're completely driving that narrative. So like when you go and you look at like the bottom, like 50% of David Grush's page, they are all references to people that are debunkers or are part of this multi-million-dollar Center for Inquiry outfit. These are all their own people that they're pushing as legitimate media, legitimate references, and they're leaving everybody else out. They're freezing out people like Ross Coulthart and whatnot. I mean, to me, is it not like a form of censorship?
Oh, it's definitely censorship. There's no question about it. I mean, that's the name of this game here. I mean, they're censoring. I'm not sure if they even understand that they're doing this. They just are in such a set of beliefs. Their minds are in such a position. Well, unless it's the government, but I don't know if I want to go there. I don't know what it is. But if say it is just this group of debunkers, their minds are made up, and so any of this kind of allusion to the possibility of an extraterrestrial presence on this planet, any kind sort of allusion to that can't be part of this. So we got to have a debunker statement saying that this is nonsense. What did Brian Dunning say about this? What did Jason Colavito say about this? What does Stephen Greenstreet say about this? And use their comments in there. Well, Mick West looked at the Roswell case, and this is a made up, but just as a for instance, Mick West looked at the Roswell case and he said, yeah, it's most certainly a balloon and dummies. That's how they make it. And then people, oh, okay. So they figured it out. Balloons and dummies. The Air Force is right. Okay. I guess I could go on with my life now. That's how they do it.
Yeah. I'm the thing that was interesting too, Mick West stated early on that like he only sees like Susan Gerbic like once a year at the Skepticon thing. But I don't know. I find that hard to believe. You go on Susan Gerbic's Twitter page and she is retweeting Mick like crazy. So maybe she does have a Mick West altar. I think maybe I should get like a one of those bobblehead dolls of Mick and put it on my desk. So switching gears, what is your take on this whole Arrow historical report debacle?
Well, I think over time here, I think we're going to be. See, the problem is that the way it was set up, the way they set that up, only having to select news people to come in. See, what happens is they get the jump on it. They had the headlines, nothing discovered, no extraterrestrials. So that's what people go on with their lives. And then we're left here to try to show to people, well, they didn't really explain this though. There's nothing explained here. Oh yeah, they went to some guy who's in the CIA and he denies ever talking about touching a real UFO. Yeah, just, it's all made up. I mean, how did we know what was said? Where was it? Any document ever signed anywhere? I mean, there's no evidence to go along with anything for the most part, what they state in there. They regurgitated the old Air Force Roswell story, of course. Yeah, the balloons, that's all people are stupid back in basically that's what they're saying. People are dummies back in Roswell in 47. And these dummies, the bodies that they saw, that was time traveling dummies from 1956 somewhere else. It's all the Arrow report over time is going to be exposed as propaganda. It's not complete. There's no explanation. They make assertions, but they don't offer the proof to back anything up in it. So I'm going through. I keep looking through it, and I can't believe what I'm seeing. And luckily though, I did see. I don't know if it was what publication it was. I was looking at something the other day. Some mainstream news outlet had an article on there about this. I can't remember which one it was offhand, but they seem to question it finally. Maybe some people in the mainstream news might start questioning this. Like, where's your proof to this? Like, maybe that's what we need to get. We need the mainstream media to finally do something here. The Washington Post, New York Times, they just seem like they drink the bathwater all the time, right? They don't do any sort of investigation, no Watergate style investigation. Anyway, they pretty much act as stenographers for the Air Force or the Pentagon. Whenever they come out with a report, the Arrow report, oh, this is what they said. It's all explained now. We could all move on with life. Right. It's all nonsense. Those people are crazy. Don't worry about it. And that's what we're getting from it. It's all that's very upsetting, and that just makes me want to even more get push for a disclosure. You know, we need to be. We need to stay strong, and we need to get the truth out, and people need to know that there's something going on here. Exactly what that something is, I don't know, but it's something extraordinary.
Yeah, there definitely is. I think the thing that really kind of surprised me was Sean Kirkpatrick's kind of post-media tour, which of course elements or a lot of what was in the Arrow report, he's out there parroting, but he's like, it's like this dude has turned like full-on conspiracy theorist. You know, Sean Kirkpatrick's like, trust me, bro, all the people in Congress, they've been fooled by these loony UFO people that treat it like a religion. So he wants you, it's like he's trading one conspiracy for another. Like he's basically saying that all of these folks that have been in the government or intelligence, DOD, whatever, that these folks that have held incredibly high security clearances. I mean, David Grush had probably more security clearance tickets than just about anyone with who he was briefing and the amount of briefings that he was done. But Kirkpatrick wants you to think that these people are just, they're bananas and they hoodwink Congress. It is literally a conspiracy theory. And the thing that is so interesting is Stephen Greenstreet, on the New York video editor for the New York Post, like, what was it, like a month or 2 months before, says exactly the same story. He parrots the exact same thing, and then Kirkpatrick comes and parrots the whole thing afterwards. It's suspicious.
Yeah, to me, that's what it looks like. That Arrow did get, they were inspired by some of the things that the debunkers had been putting out there. Like, yeah, okay, this looks like a good excuse. I think we'll use it in our Arrow report. Yeah, we'll just say this one. Looks like there's a lot of dummies that already bought it online. A lot of these, the dummies that are following the debunkers, right? What do I call them? The cultists. Right. The ones that are like really they're like religious, the ones that hang on Mick West's every tweet, like they're falling for it. Maybe we could do it too. That's what it looks like to me. It's a simple fact, simple matter of that. Yeah, it definitely is. And I've wanted to reply to a tweet that Mick put out. It's like, dude, why are you still tweeting about this? You were proved right with this Arrow report. Why aren't you moving on to something else? It's so funny. These debunkers, I like to call them debunkers. And again, there's a difference between debunkers and skeptics. And in my view, the debunkers, they are starting from a predetermined result and kind of shoehorning the data or selectively selecting what they want to talk about to support this thing. But they criticize people like myself, and maybe you've received these criticisms that we're all bilking or grifting or whatever. But look at what they're doing. They're still at it. And right. Well, what's interesting though, Matt, is the fact that there's no research for the most part. It's just proclamations. Like just recently, I was on Twitter and I was conversing. I was talking about somebody did a podcast, Cosmic Road. Jack Connor from Cosmic Road did a podcast talking about these Peruvian corpses that people, you've heard that story, and I'm not sure what that is or not. But now you have scientists in Mexico who are stating that these are non-human remains. We don't know what they are, and they're inviting anybody else from America to come here and examine these corpses. So I put it out there. I said, where's all the debunkers? Here's their big chance to prove that this is a big hoax. They should be hiring their own group of scientists to go down and examine these corpses and figure out whether it's a hoax or not once and for all. And Mick West actually ended up responding to this. He goes, well, he's not going to do it because that's too silly. It's too silly. And I was like, thank you so much. You just admitted it. Mick West just did his research via proclamation, and that's what they do. And then somebody else put a comment. One of the debunker acolytes threw something out there at me to the effect of, yeah, but they're not going there for the same reason they're not going to Ireland to look for leprechauns. And I said, well, there's nobody in Ireland. There's no scientist in Ireland right now saying that there's leprechauns there, that they have scientific evidence of leprechauns. I mean, if that was the case, I mean, say there was, you would be going out there, but that's not what we're talking about here. See, you could always get them in the end. They always lose the argument in the end. They can't win, because they're so close-minded, and then you get to a point like in a debate, and they always hit a brick wall at the end. They just cannot win this argument, and they never will. They just won't investigate. That's how they do. They do this via proclamation. They investigate via proclamation. I say it's not real, and that's it. Final word. No reason to look at this. I don't know. They say they're from space. I don't know what they are, but I don't need to look at it because leprechauns in Ireland.
Yeah,
I mean that's what we're getting here.
Yeah, it totally is. It was an interview. I think the only interview that Mick West did with Lou Elizondo, and I don't remember the specifics of it. I watched this about a year ago, but so Mick is asking Lou all of these questions, and finally Lou backed Mick up into a corner where it was obvious Mick did not know what the hell he was talking about. And Mick, man, he flipped on a dime and changed the subject. It just completely ignored what Lou said, and because I think he knew he had been called out. And Lou, being the classy guy he is, he didn't hold him, he didn't call him out on it and just let him do his thing. But even like So Mick has just been constantly going back and forth with Mark von Rennenkamp on the gimbal videos and the others. And Mick has, there's another, I'm sorry, not Mick, Mark, there's a scientist on there that debates back and forth. And what is interesting, you'll see Mick in there debating, and then all of a sudden he's silent, and then somebody brand new debunker comes in. It's like some wrestling tag team match where Mick tags in someone else. But Mick kept getting backed into this corner, and finally Mick changes his tune and has this theory that all of these multiple military sensor systems had to have failed at the same time, and that explains it all. So all these multi-million-dollar mil-spec systems all glitched simultaneously, and that is why the gimbal thing is completely fake. And another thing that I thought was really telling, so Mark, I've met Mark, I've spent time with him, just a classy guy, met him at Seoul. So he goes on Mick's podcast to have a healthy debate about the gimbal thing. And Mark, man, my hat is off to him for going into the lion's den there. But at one point, Mick makes this kind of Freudian slip where, I don't remember the exact quote, I need to dig it up, but essentially Mick said his counter argument or how he was trying to support himself, he blurted this out, well, you believe all these are space aliens. And that immediately just told me right there, that is the lens he's looking at this from, that we're all kooky, that we all believe this stuff. And like I said, it was kind of a Freudian slip in my opinion. But yeah, I love the whole acolyte thing. I'm quite certain a lot of these folks have some kind of what is the word you were talking about, homage or what do you call this thing? When they have like worship at like a temple of Mick West or something like that.
Yeah, it's like the Church of Mick West of Latter-day insurrectionist era priests.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, because they treat or not insurrectionist. What's the word? And what was Torquemada, the Inquisition era priest? That's what I meant.
Oh, yeah. No, exactly.
Because I mean, that's what it feels like, right? I mean, you look at these people; they remind you, like you're looking back in history. These people that couldn't believe that the Earth is the. If you say the Earth isn't the center of the universe, well, guess what? We're going to burn you at the stake. I mean, that's what it feels like today. Now they'll do. There's character assassination. They're not burning us at the stake anymore. Now there's character assassination instead. That's what they do. I mean, look what David Grush. I mean, he comes out, and next thing you know, go sick him. Here's some information for you. Go ahead. You know, that's what it is. It's the same thing, except in a different form.
Yeah,
and that's what's going on here. It's like they're in the cult. They are in the cult. They can't break free. They can't give. There's no give whatsoever. In the UFO community, we all agree. There's misidentifications. There are hoaxes. There's balloons. There's this. There's that, and there's also the possibility that it's extraterrestrial or non-human. They can't go to that, even though the evidence clearly shows that there's something going on. And even though the evidence clearly shows, if you do your research, that there has been a cover-up for a long time. And the United States government, as well as other governments of the world, have been very interested in this since at least the late 1940s. But they can't go there. They won't cross that line. Sagan only allows them to believe in life on other planets somewhere. And that's the only thing they'll agree to. Without any proof, too, by the way. They have no proof for that, even though I agree with them, but that's about it.
It's all literally all by declaration.
By declaration.
Yeah, they must understand more about the universe than all of us. And the thing that I find that is so insulting, not only from the debunkers and the Arrow report, like it would be one thing if Mick or any of these folks said, you know what, I think it's prosaic, but I think it's probably a seagull, but you know what? Maybe it is something else that we don't quite understand. They kind of treat it as a sort of kind of flippant. They're just so flippant about it, and that's what I think is insulting, and it's insulting to people like you and myself and others that have experienced this thing firsthand, and I think many of us have, it's been a challenge at times to kind of absorb all of this and figure out what we're seeing. And, and there have been times initially when I first saw what I saw, I'm like, man, did I imagine that? Now, when I saw it multiple times and I realized that I wasn't, but imagine yourself, or imagine being a person that is not into the UAP topic, or has never even tracked it, that all of a sudden sees this stuff. They go online to try and understand what they saw, and if they're nutty, and they go on Wikipedia or Metabunk, and essentially they're kind of telling them that they're all nuts. It's not compassionate in my view.
No, there's no compassion. They'll drag your name through the mud if they don't like it. If you pose any sort of threat, like David Grush, see, he throws as a threat to their worldview, and that's why you got to send out Ken Klippenstein to dig up, to do a dirty story on them, make him look like a nut. So anybody that comes close to that, they're definitely going to go after you. And try to make a fool out of you. It's going to be character assassination. They've been doing this for a long time. Philip Klass was great at this. He was one who really started that back in the 60s. He started attacking, he was, of course, the late debunker. He started attacking any story, told people they were outright liars, and, went public like this, made them try to look like fools. The Travis Walton story, that story, the 1964 Lonnie Zamora story, he'll go after that, try to make it look like it was all a hoax or a trick or some sort of nonsense, and say there's absolutely no way it had anything to do with extraterrestrials. That's not an option, and it's been going on ever since. Actually, James McDonald was somebody, the late James McDonald, who was the professor who studied UFOs, thought there was merit in scientifically studying these things. He was someone who was attacked relentlessly by Philip Klass in the 60s. Actually, eventually, unfortunately, James McDonald committed suicide in the early 1970s. Whether it was because of how he was getting treated because of Philip Klass, nobody will ever know, but that's something that happened. So that's what they do. That's what their game is. To get you out of the way, they're going to say, okay, you want to go there? Okay, dude, we're going to do this to you now. So look what we just happened. Look what we just did to David Grush. So if you want to be a whistleblower, we're going to come after you. We're going to dig up your past and make you look like a fool. That's how they operate.
Yeah, it's a total intimidation tactic. Now, a couple of shows ago, I spoke a little bit about the church committee and how there is a very long history of the CIA paying journalists to toe the CIA's line. Would it surprise you that people like Klippenstein or Julian Barnes at the New York Times, would it surprise you that any of these folks are on the dole with CIA or DOD paying these folks to propagate their
I think,
points?
well, maybe like some I would be surprised that. I would be surprised that a Ken Klippenstein, because he doesn't seem like he seems like he's an attack dog and he doesn't know any better. I think like he was, given the red meat and he goes, go get it, then go get it. And he went and did it. Like that's what he does. So I don't think but maybe someone else, like you mentioned, that's different. I don't know, but I can't, certain ones, no, other ones possibly. I don't know if I'd be surprised. Nothing would surprise me with this one, because the government, the section of the government that is covering this up, is still very interested in maintaining that cover up. And so nothing would surprise me at this point.
Yeah, and speaking of cover up, this whole Langley Air Force Base thing in Washington, D.C., that I think was the War Zone posted, I think it was on Friday. What are your thoughts on that? Have you heard anything additional? It completely sounds like it's UAP, not prosaic drones.
At first blush, it looks like it could be something extraordinary, but I think I need to know more about it before I go making any sort of come into a conclusion on it. I mean, that's how it has to be, though, right? I mean, Absolutely. It just came out. Like a lot of people jump on stuff all immediately and will say, "Well, I think it's from outer space," right? Well, hold on a second. Let's make sure of this. Right. I think you got to make sure of it first. You got because some things obviously aren't. I mean. Like there's a lot of things I think are hoaxes out there. I don't, for instance, I don't believe in the Skinny Bob videos. I think that was CGI'd and just thrown out there by somebody. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen anything that tells me that shows that that's real. The Trinity UFO crash. I think that that's a hoax. I think that there was evidence that research that was done by Douglas Dean Johnson recently that shows that the Trinity story was a hoax and that Jacques Vallée was apparently taken for a ride. So there's some things where you have to, you got to be able to say what you think is where there's something at and where there's nothing at, and you got to be able to draw a line here. See, that's the difference between people in the UFO community and debunkers. Debunkers, they're going to stay here no matter what. Where people in the UFO community are going to weigh everything and then make up their mind, determine what the possibilities are, and if it's real or if it's not real. That's the difference.
Debunking is definitely a cult. That is for sure. And I agree with you on the whole Langley thing. It's too early to say. It's whatever it is. I think it's probably definitely alarming. If it's a non-human intelligence, that's alarming. If it's somebody else that, little Johnny with his fleet of quadcopters flying it over, that's not good either. So either way you look at it, it's not a good thing at all. So Jim, what do you expect us to see in 2024? I know if you had a looking glass, what would be your guess?
I think we're going to get a lot more obfuscation, a lot more lying from people with the government. But I think that I am very happy with the fact that it looks like the UAP Caucus in the House is still moving forward. And it seems like they pretty much already brushed that Arrow report right off their back. Like they didn't even consider it in their letter. They didn't even mention it. And they want a select committee. If we get that select committee, we might see some more whistleblowers stepping up and telling us what they know. Maybe there's always a chance that one of these whistleblowers has something that they could show us. And if that happens, then, hey, this could be the year. But then again, maybe we're just marching. It's going to take a few more years before we finally get there. But at some point, one way or another, we're going to get there. There's no doubt in my mind at some point it's going to happen. It has to, because it's real. So Absolutely. That's where I'm at.
Absolutely. Let's see, Lady Bentley from the UK, thank you very much for the super chat. And Jim, thank you for joining us. This literally in the middle of the tape that I'm rolling, I have a friend connect us and I'm like, hey man, would you like to come on the show? And I appreciate you putting all of whatever your plans are on this Sunday on hold to come on the show, man. It's I love your style and love your unfiltered assessment of stuff. And yeah, so how can folks find your show? It's the Quirk Zone, and you're on YouTube, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's on Quirk Zone is on YouTube, and the show is called Extraterrestrial Reality. And on Spotify, it's called UFO Extraterrestrial Reality. That's the name of my show. So I actually have more followers on Spotify right now, and but both channels are getting, I keeps growing every day. More and more people. So check me out on Spotify or on YouTube. I really appreciate you having me on, Matt. This was a lot of fun to talk about these things, and we're going to get there.
We are definitely going to get there. That is for sure. And yeah, so do me a favor if you don't mind, Jim, when you're off, just send me your links, and I'll be sure to put that in our YouTube description so people will be able to find your show. And would love to have you back on, man. This has been fun. I like your take on things.
Thanks a lot, Matt. It was a lot of fun for me too.
Awesome. All right. Have a great Sunday.
Yeah,
folks,
you too.
Folks, if you enjoyed our show, please tell your friends about us on social media. Our show spreads by word of mouth. The more people that watch, the more we can spread our message on this important topic, and also for other shows too, like Jim and there are so many people that are putting out really great content on this particular topic. And the more people that are putting out quality, honest, unbiased content, the more kind of the average folk that doesn't track this topic, the higher the chance the higher the chance will be that they're going to come across this kind of programming. So, we always encourage all of you to support fellow creators. That's why I love having guests from other shows come on. It's our chance to promote them as well. There's room for everybody in this. This is a group effort. This isn't like down to like one or two guys or whatnot. It's everybody that is putting out good content. Give them a follow, tell people about it, give them a thumbs up, give them a subscribe. As I always say, all those little things that you hear other YouTube people say, smash that thumbs up button, etc., leave a comment, all of those things, every single one of these platforms, be it a podcast platform, Spotify, that Jim is on, and YouTube, when you go and you make the effort to do those things, the algorithms on those platforms, they look at those signals and use those to decide whether to promote that content organically to other people. So doing all those things, I know it seems silly, but it really does help. And and as always, as we said before, if you enjoyed this program, please hit that subscribe and thumbs up button, as I just said. And we are also slow to build our following on Twitter, which I guess is now called X. So you can find us at Good Trouble Show. We tend to post all of our stuff on there, and certainly would appreciate a follow. And we will see you next week. We have a really great guest lined up this coming Sunday that we will announce soon. So thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next week on the Good Trouble Show.